Hey, and welcome back to another episode. I'm super excited for our next guest, Kyle McDowell. He is a former Fortune 10 executive turned inspirational leader, best-selling author, and leadership coach. Kyle is on a quest to create cultures of excellence around the world by reigniting leaders' passions and purpose. With nearly 3 decades of experience leading tens of thousands of employees at some of America's biggest firms, Kyle's philosophy is rooted in trademark principle, begin with we. Kyle is on a clear mission to crush the deep-rooted dysfunction so many organizations passively accept. Kyle elevates leaders and sparks massive change with organizations by adopting a mindset that prioritizes we over I and you over me. Kyle's insights have earned him invitations to speak at prestigious businesses, educational institutions, and nonprofit organizations, and his expertise has been featured in major national publications, including the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, and Inc. magazine. So I'm really excited to have our next guest. So Kyle, welcome to the show.
Hey, Tim, man, it's good to see you. Great to be here.
Glad that you were able to be here and to make it. I'm super excited about, having this conversation today. So my first question to you is, what led you to go from the mindset shift of like me-oriented thinking to we-oriented thinking?
Boy, that decision it took me 20 years to make that decision. So I was in big corporate America for about 30 years, and it was around year 20 that my level of apathy had reached such a point that I just couldn't escape this one resounding over and over question that I kept hearing in my brain. And it was, is there a better way? And it was, is there a better way? And it's probably worth sharing that at that point of my life, I was on the doorstep of a divorce, which ultimately happened. My health was not in a good place. I just wasn't a very happy person. And man, when you spend 20 years building a career and you wake up and have to go to offices that you just don't want to go to, and you loathe the environments that you were responsible for creating, it's a real gut punch. So I just gotten to this point where is there a better way became such a common theme in almost everything I was doing at that time that I actually had to try to answer it. And I did answer it. One evening, I just accepted a new role inside of a really big company where I was leading about 15,000 people. It's a $7 billion program. And this was around the time that I just made the decision I was going to be the leader I never had. I had this recipe for delivering results, but it also brought apathy and a big void of connection as well. I didn't have any tight connections with my circle, which I think is always telling. And the night before I was going to meet with the top 40 or 50 leaders of this new organization that I had just joined, I was there about 60 days at the time. I asked the senior leadership group to come together. And that night before, I just knew I had to do something different, because the Kyle of old for the previous 20 years would have stepped up and said, what I'm here to do, be all about me, my resume, how I'm qualified to do this, follow me, kind of the Braveheart thing. But it would have been more of a facade than anything, candidly. So that evening, I just had to create a PowerPoint, because there's no good corporate meeting without at least one PowerPoint. So I just put fingers to keyboard. And after about 2 hours of trying to come up with something that would resonate. And my goal, by the way, for that speech the next morning was to really set the expectation of what the team should have of me, which was a really kind of contrary approach to the way I'd led in the past. And I replayed, probably dozens of scenarios that evening that left me feeling less than whole, that left me feeling like I wasn't adding value, like I wasn't valued. And I came up with these 10 sentences, and they each began with the word we, and they still do. And I'm not super creative, and they felt like principles at the time. So they became the 10 we's, and they're my principles for leadership. But I have to share also, Tim, that one of the more profound experiences I've had over the last few years, I created these in 2017, is the role that they're now playing in my personal life, which has been really, really impactful in ways that are really, as I said, profound to me.
So I kind of want to go back to what you said of you had a recipe for getting results and it led to a lot of apathy. I can only imagine what that looked like. Can you kind of explain? Because I want to make sure that we really tease out the difference between people who are in a very authoritarian, like this is the me show and this is what I'm about. And so we can get to the we mindset.
Yeah, well, I have to start with ego. So for me, and I think it's pretty universal, the limiting factor from leaving that boss command and control paradigm and becoming a leader that has a lasting impact. And I mean lasting longer than the tenure of the role that you're in. I mean, someone's talking about you 20 years after working in the same shop. That ego, for me, I always felt as if I had to have all the answers. I had to have the ideas. I had to have the best idea. And there's this self-fulfilling thing that happens in almost every organization, especially in pretty large organizations, this self-fulfilling cycle that happens. And well, I'll say it like this, Tim. So let's pretend you and I are on a team together. We've got a boss that you and I are pretty aligned that we're not fans of him. We just don't like his command and control, bang a fist on the desk, kind of raise your voice kind of fella. And he gets promoted, right? Let's just say he moves on to another role, but now he's tasked with hiring his backfill. And you and I, man, we've always been open about how we dislike this guy. Like, he's just not a good leader. He doesn't inspire us, doesn't motivate us. Try as we might to not do this, human nature kind of propels us to emulate some of the same behaviors that we loathed in that guy. Why? Because it's going to endear us to him. And he's the one that's going to make the decision on this promotion. So what happens is we start to behave in ways that aren't really authentic to us, but we've witnessed it and observed it throughout our careers. And we know that if we kind of mirror and mimic that behavior, there's a better chance that those in a more senior position are going to recognize us and we'll get promoted. So the cycle happens. And I was really guilty of that cycle and a victim of it as well. I mean, I was raised in an era where it wasn't uncommon for the boss to bang a fist on a desk, raise their voice. I was shouted at multiple times throughout my career. So I was able to deliver results, but it was really out of compliance more than commitment. I wasn't committed to really anything bigger than just the X's and O's of the role. And, come to find out, that's a really short-sighted way to approach your work, because you can have such a greater impact if you actually look at it more than just a job, as an opportunity to impact others, add value for others. So for me, the apathy came when I saw I was running really hard, delivering great results, but this lack of connection became so significant that it's like, there must be more than this. There must be something different. And that's where this "is there a better way" kept playing over and over again.
Yeah. So let's go back to the connection piece, because I have a feeling that there are people out there who think they have the same leadership style based on what you're talking about. And I'm with you. I grew up getting yelled at all the time, like, what are you talking about? Right. And so they emulate, like you said, because, they're going to get promoted, and they think they have a connection with their people, but there's something missing. So let's talk about what that connection really is.
So I approach the connection, or the need for connection, as utility, essentially, right? I only wanted or needed to connect with you just as much, or just enough to get as much out of you as I could. That's just kind of how I was brought up to think a boss should behave. Well, it turns out that the more energy, time, and frankly, care you invest in those around you, not just in getting results out of them, but actually, one of the 10 We's is we pick each other up. And at first it sounds like that's when someone's struggling, you have to extend a hand, which it is. That's part of the point of We number 6. But I think there's something that's, I think, even more important, that it's a corollary, is I think it's an obligation to lift others to new heights. It's a human obligation. So I just tell folks, if you approach your role, if you're in any kind of position of authority, you have people reporting to you, you can approach it as a job and you'll get a job experience. And for many, that's okay. But if you approach it as an opportunity to have a greater impact on those around you, particularly those that you lead, and helping them become their very best, helping them even leave your organization if it's something that they desire to do, you form connections that can weather any storm and they transcend the workplace. Now, I'm not implying that we have to be best friends. We go for beers 3-4 nights a week. I'm not saying that at all. You know the feeling, especially with your background, when you know the guy or the gal to your left or right will run through a wall for you because they know you'll run through a wall for them. Results come so much more easily. And I can actually quantify what I missed out on, because if I look back in the first 20 years of my career, today, Tim, I probably have 2 fellas, maybe 3 people in total that I would categorize as a friend that I can reach out to, or we just check in on each other every now and then. The last 10 years, that number's triple, if not more. I still have one-on-ones with people from my teams from years ago that I haven't worked with in half a decade or more, because I know they care about my growth, they care about my development, and just me as a human on this planet, and vice versa. They know that I care about what's happening with them. And we bounce ideas off of each other. We talk through struggles that we're having in and out of the workplace. And I think that's what's lost, man. For whatever reason, there's probably some good, but mostly bad reasons. We lose a bit of our humanity when we step into the workplace, and we've lost sight of what it is that we're capable of doing in terms of impact. And that's how I led. I was really focused on the KPIs, the metrics, things that could kind of check boxes to help my promotions. And the ultimate gut punch for me was when I had this "is there a better way" phenomenon running through my brain over and over again. I reached out to those that were, I thought they had a lot of respect for me and could tell me things that I needed to hear, not wanted to hear, but it turned out they only feared me. Which is a real hard thing to swallow when you think these are your comrades, the folks that you're really kind of gone through a lot with and willing to go through more with, but they're only behaving that way because they fear you. That's not a good feeling. So that it really forced me to change.
Yeah. And you've talked about this compliance versus commitment and out of that fear before. So when you made that shift into the 10 We principles, how did that help gain more commitment and improve everything than your previous approaches?
Well, I think it'd be misleading to say that it helped anything right away, because the way I framed them that day in 2017 and every day since then is, I can tell you what to expect from me. And I think that's probably the biggest bit of advice that I would offer to your audience is when you're trying to make connections with those in your circle and you're trying to take a team to excellence, aligning on expectations is it's it. But not just the KPIs, what I expect for you to deliver, but how we do it, our behaviors, how we treat one another. So my position that morning was, you guys, if nothing else, I did, by the way, Tim, I didn't advertise. I didn't put them on a wall. I didn't wear shirts. We had no swag. There was none of this stuff. It wasn't an initiative. I just told the team, if you see me behaving contrary to any one of these principles, grab me by the ear and tell me I'm being a hypocrite, which took a lot of guts from me because that's not something I ever would have offered in the previous 20 years. And I think over time, I know over time, me living them and owning when I didn't live them publicly, conspicuously to the team, it earned the respect that this is not happy talk. It's not words on a wall. You know, an interesting kind of corollary to this, dude, is oftentimes when I'm on stage, I'll ask members, depending on the audience, I have to feel this out at first. Raise your hand if your company has a mission statement. Everybody's hands go up. Keep your hand up if you can recite it. You see all these hands start going down. And I never wanted to be associated with that. I didn't want to be associated with hollow words on a wall that no one can recite that just make me feel good at the moment, but didn't drive change. And I remember very vividly, dude, there was a woman in the audience that morning of that 50. She was a direct report of mine who was incredibly difficult with me. And she would admit this to this day because there's a happy ending to the story, but she challenged me at every turn. And one of the principles is we challenge each other. And it's followed by we embrace challenge. And this new approach that I had kind of challenged myself to take on told me that her being difficult, it had nothing to do with me. It had everything to do with how she had been burned by leaders in the past. And she was just a product of the environments in which she had kind of grown up. For whatever reason, I recognized I needed to embrace her challenges and not pull out my business card to say because I said so. The happy ending to the story is when we first started working together, it was no secret she was not a fan. And it was a secret that I wasn't a fan because I swallowed it. A decade later, she's one of my closest confidants. And we talk every 4 to 6 weeks or so. We haven't worked together in years. But it was that embrace of challenge. I was living what I was saying. I wasn't just saying it. Now, I don't want to imply that I'm perfect at it because I'm not. But the more consistently you can show your commitment to your own principles, the more likely it is that others will follow.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you, how was it when you told somebody like, hey, if I'm not living up to what I say I'm going to live up to me, I need you to tell me and call me out on it. Hold me accountable to my words. And then it happened. Like, do you remember the first time it happened and how you felt about it? Because I have a similar story of I adopted a similar thing and told somebody that, and then they pulled me aside and told me about it. And I was like, oh, that did not feel anywhere near where I thought it was going to feel. And it was a gut check. And, I had to make a change because like, I need to live the way I need to feel. How did that work out for you?
Well,
how did that feel?
I'm curious though, what was the feedback that you heard that was a surprise to you?
Yeah. So it wasn't necessarily a surprise. It was, I have a very similar thing where I sit people down and I say, hey, look, this is how I operate. And if I ever deviate from the way I say I'm going to operate, I need you to let me know. And this person pulled me aside and said, hey, you said you value family time, but you've stepped on family time, this time, this time, this time, and this time. And I was like, you know what? You're right. I did do that. And I had to apologize for it. I was like, I'm sorry. It was necessary, but I did say, you know what? You're right. I did step on your time and I will make a concerted effort in the future to not do that. So now I don't ever send emails out outside of normal business hours. I set them up to send like first thing in the morning on like automatic mail, because then people feel like they need to respond back because it was a hot item for me, but not for them.
Yep.
So,
how many years ago was that?
That was about 10 years ago.
Do you remember the person's name?
Yes, I do.
That's the point. That's the point. What an impact you had on them, but also sounds like this person had a tremendous impact on you because you weren't walking your own walk, right? And that's kind of the connection, the bond point that I'm trying to make. For me, my ego was such that challenge to me, I'll put it this way. The only thing stronger than my ego at that time was my desire to never be called a hypocrite. And for me, it's like the worst thing you can call me is a hypocrite. So was it easy when I was challenged? Absolutely not, because I was used to leaning on my business card and just kind of going with it because I said so. And with this particular person, Julia, I can use her name because she knows I tell the story because we're so tight now. She acknowledges to this day how difficult she was. And we both acknowledge had we handled that time differently, we would not have the connection we have today. But again, it never happens with the typical quote unquote boss ego that I think so many of us carry from day to day.
Yeah. And so with that, when we talk about challenges, because you said we challenge each other, and how did that work in that framework?
So there's a rule. So challenges have to be grounded in data or experience, one or the other, or both, but they cannot be opinion because that's a slippery slope. We all have them. There's a crude cliche that follows that sentence. So by the way, if you subscribe to the principles, which you must to be on the team, and I remember saying that morning, I've said it every keynote since then, if you feel like you can't subscribe to these principles, I will help you find another role. And I don't mean fire you. I mean, I will help you find another role inside of the organization. But there's a bigger message there. If you can't get behind, we do the right thing, we lead by example, we say what we're going to do, and when we do it all the way through number 10, then I I don't want you in my circle anyway. You can't hold yourself accountable to these fundamental principles. So if you are subscribed, you know that not only are you obligated to challenge with data or experience, but you've also subscribed to we number 9, and that challenge must be embraced. And when we talk about challenges being embraced, it's not only me to you to me, boss to, it's external as well, right? Whatever competitive threats we're facing, whatever pricing constraint, whatever the scenario is, we've aligned that we're going to embrace challenge. We're not going to run from it. We're going to be galvanized by it, but we're not going to rush foolhardy into things either. Like, we're going to recognize this is gnarly. We're not excited about this, but it's not going away. And if it's in our circle, we own it. Absolute ownership. So for me, it was just really important to walk the walk, but hold myself accountable to the challenges I issued, being grounded in data or experience, and pushing back on others when it was just more of an opinion thing. But it's like this, man. If you're in a staff meeting and you're kind of wrestling with a difficult issue, and someone says, I was with another organization and we took a similar approach to something and it didn't go well, we got to listen to that person. Or if they say, well, I'm looking at this report and it says that our numbers are down because of X, Y, we got to listen to that person. Regardless if you birthed the idea that we're talking about or not, that's a great data point or experience point that we should take into account. And so holding people accountable to every one of the principles, and then kind of the sub components of the principles, they don't all have subcomponents. That one certainly does. We challenge each other, is important, but not nearly as important as living it myself.
I could see how people would fear with the we principles of developing groupthink. And then you have that we challenge each other. How hard was it to get people to get away from opinion and go back to fact? Like,
Dude,
this is a fact.
It's in our nature, especially if the topic that we're discussing is something that I'm responsible for birthing or bringing to fruition. Like, we have a connection to that. We have this personal connection to our work. And what I'm about to say, I think, flies in the face of a lot of common thinking, but I found it to be true, at least for me. The less personally connected I am to my work, the better I am, because I can see things more clearly. Now, we're always going to have bias, but if I can approach it from, I want this to be right, I don't need to be right, I want to find right, it tends to kind of lower this want that we all have to be the person to bring the best ideas forward. So I think it's just important to recognize that ideas are going to come from all places, sometimes the most unexpected of places, right? It's sometimes the newest person has the best perspective because we've been doing this stuff for a while and we can't see the forest for the trees. That happens. And I just think even if we don't follow the challenge that someone issued, but we recognize it, consider it, and embrace it, and we go a different path, that person knows their voice can be heard. They know that there's value in their contribution. So it's hard to live if you're used to this command and control style, but the connection that's formed and the better outcomes you find as a result are irrefutable.
So you keep saying the command and control style. How prevalent do you think that still is in corporate America today? Like, do you think it is more prevalent?
No, I don't. I think it is. So I look at it this way. For decades, if not centuries, companies had the ability to say, come work for us and you'd be lucky to be here. We're not lucky to have you. You're lucky to be here. With the proliferation of work at home, the gig economy, any other kind of, the evolution of the workplace is such that bosses have had, and organizations more broadly, have had to adopt their approach to the workforce, because I'm no longer confined to my zip code. I'm not confined to this hemisphere. I can work in the guy that does our web work is in Bulgaria. He bounces between there and other parts of Europe, which is great for him, but he couldn't have done that 10 years ago. So I do believe command and control is still prevalent in pockets. I hate to say it, it is a profile typically that still leads that way, and it tends to be kind of up in age, older than the average worker nowadays. But I do think that the changes that we're seeing in that type of leadership style is not because of a want, it's because it's a must. The workforce rather, is forcing that change. And I think it's great, by the way.
I agree. Because you brought up something earlier when you talked about getting stuff out of people. It came from more of like a manipulation tactic. Like, I'm only going to invest in you to manipulate you to get you to do what you want. And now we're swinging to, hey, I just want you to perform the best you can for the whole team.
That's it. And for you, man, right?
Which I think is a great idea. And the fact that we're going there. But you have another principle that I think could possibly get people in trouble, which is we measure outcomes, not activity. So how hard is that to do?
Very hard. You're talking about we number 7s. We measure ourselves by outcomes, not activity. And I created that one very purposely because there's this group of people inside most organizations, especially the larger ones, once you get into hundreds, if not thousands and tens of thousands of employees, there's a very, and it's not a small percentage of people that take pride in their level of busyness. And in my work today, I work with very senior leaders at very big companies who wear their calendar like a badge of honor. I had a very senior HR leader once. We were talking about culture and kind of investing time and energy into people more than the metrics. And by the way, I don't mean to come across soft because there's nobody more committed to the data and the metrics than I am. I just think how I approach getting there has changed so much. But anyway, I was in a conversation with her trying to kind of convince her, and it was odd to have to convince a very senior HR person that, people are kind of the lifeblood of this organization. She said, well, if I had more time, I would be able to invest more time in one-on-ones and, development type conversations with my team. I just don't have time. And she pivoted her laptop around to show me her calendar, which is not the first time that's happened, by the way. This is the most recent. And her calendar was indeed packed, back to back all day, double booked half part of the day, even triple booked occasionally a couple times. But I'd worked with this person for long enough to know, in a previous conversation, she had shared the handful of metrics that she was accountable for every single year. Her performance appraisal had these 5 or 6 metrics, right? I said, okay, so let's look at your calendar. Let's draw a straight line, an imaginary straight line from every one of these meetings. We're going to go one by one. Since you volunteered, I didn't ask to see your calendar. You rotated. Let's draw a line from every one of these meetings to those handful of accountabilities, we'll call them, that you've been asked to deliver in the role that you're in. And she really struggled. Well, this meeting is important because blah, blah, blah. No, show me how it's driving or adding value. Show me. Well, it's because, nope. So that's maybe a trite example of, we conflate busyness with outcomes and with actual progress. The real world cares about outcomes. And here's how I encourage folks to look at it. If your client knew you were in X number of hours of meetings the previous day, but they don't see a tangible result or outcome because of all of this activity, and there's not one in the near future for them, they would certainly ask you, what the hell are you doing? You're not adding additional value for me. So if you can't draw a straight line from the activity in which you're engaged to the outcomes that matter, those that have been already predetermined and you've aligned around those expectations, and you can't justify it in a way that says, I'm adding value for our customers, it really should be scrutinized. And you're not the first person to say I can get folks in trouble, especially, I mentioned the proliferation of work at home. I'm one of these guys now. I don't really care how many hours a week you work. Why? Because we've aligned on the expectations that you must deliver in the role that you're in. If you can do it in 10 hours, love that for you. If you can do it in 80, you got to do it in 80 because we've again aligned on these expectations. Now we can talk, should we add more to your plate, maybe promote you, give you a different scope or sphere of responsibility? That's the conversation to have. Or should we lighten your workload? However, going into this, it's all about the outcomes. And I'm just not impressed with activity if it doesn't lead to an outcome that we can either learn from or delivers a result to those that we serve.
Absolutely. And I'm really glad that you have this as a we principle, because I hear it all the time. I don't have time to do this, or I'm too busy with that, or look at all the things that we're doing, on the calendar. And then, like you said, you draw a line to okay, what does any of that have to do with what we've actually asked you to do? And it's hardly there. And so I equate it to, you have like a truck or a vehicle stuck in mud, right? And so you can be stuck in mud, you can press the gas, you're going to have mud fly everywhere. It's going to be muddy. It's going to be messy. You're going to burn some energy. The gas is going to go down.
Those tires are spinning.
They're spinning, but you don't go anywhere. You're just there. Right. And so it takes one person to go, well, maybe we should put some sticks or some plywood and get you out of the mud. Right. Or let's just push you a little bit along.
Yeah.
And I think,
it's a great metaphor.
If we get back to what you said is drawing those connective tissue to what am I doing and what is the outcome it's going to produce, we'll find that we have a lot more time than we think we do.
And the work that we're doing becomes much more important. It's truly value add at that point. Some pushback I get on this is, activity is required for outcomes. Of course it is, but they should always be connected to outcomes. We want our work, I boil it down to what I just call the ABCs of the employee value proposition. We all want to add value. That's the A. We all want to be valued. We want to be recognized for a job well done. And if we're really lucky, we get to connect that value, connect the value to the work that we've done to those that ultimately benefit from the work. And not all jobs are capable of doing that because we have behind the scenes and back office stuff. I get that. But if I'm adding value and I feel as if I'm being valued, that means the work that I'm doing is not busy work by definition. I'm doing something that actually moves the needle and adds value. So you'll find that if you take that approach with people and being really explicit to say things like, if this meeting that you're invited to, that's on your calendar, doesn't add value to the things that we've asked you to do in the role that you're in, don't go. Don't go. And so what happens is you start to get people more disciplined around their meeting etiquette. They invite the right people, and the audience is usually smaller. They become much more disciplined in capturing and memorializing the notes that came out of that meeting and who's on point to do what and by when should it be delivered. So we get a lot more focused on the outcomes because everyone's on board that this is what matters, not just how hard we run to get there. Dude, I love the tire spinning metaphor. I told you I'm going to use that. It's so good.
Feel free. So when you say the meetings become smaller, have you noticed a correlation to how many meetings become working groups versus how many meetings are truly just coordination efforts?
I would like to say yes, but I've taken the approach now for so long, the last decade or so in my own career, that I just don't go to meetings that don't add value to what I'm trying to deliver. Now, for your audience who hears that and says, well, yeah, he's a senior guy. He doesn't have to. He could get away with that. There's some truth to that. But the more, again, if we're going to challenge each other, that challenge could include, well, this is my experience. Me sitting in this meeting is not adding value to the things that you've asked me to do, boss. So can I have a pass? Do I need to come to this? We're adults in the workplace. So allowing people to pick and choose where they spend their time, again, with those expectations, the delivery of the things that we've assigned them, that's not changing. So it's on you to go to this meeting or not. If it adds value, great. We'll see you there. If it doesn't, don't go. I think I did quote this in the first book. There's a stat from Korn Ferry who did this survey on several thousand participants in the survey. And it was the theme of the survey was meetings. And I think like 67% said they would attend a meeting, even if they knew going into it, it did not add any value to the work that they've been asked to deliver. 2 out of 3 people, man. So how many hours are we losing to people sitting in a meeting that they know they shouldn't be in, but it makes whoever scheduled the meeting feel good and with a little bit of power that they can dictate someone else's schedule? It's crazy to me, especially again, if we're aligned on what it is that we're here to do and the outcomes that we're chasing. Don't spend time in meaningless meetings that don't further those objectives, or at least talk about it.
No, absolutely.
Right?
And I love that as a principle. Now, did you find it, as this progressed, do you still find it challenging that you have to go back and recourse correct and say, hey, we're getting after busyness again and we're not really going after results? Or does it kind of become self-sufficient and take care of itself?
Well, I think there was this weird thing that happened to me when I first introduced them where, well, let me back up a second. You know this, the more, you definitely know this, the more senior you are in any organization, the funnier your jokes are, the more people want to spend time with you and get that face time with you, and the more they're willing to tell you things that they think you want to hear, not what you need to hear. So the first 6 to 9 months, maybe even as long as a year, I was convinced that what I was seeing flourish, how the 10 We's were really kind of making their way. We had 11 locations, and I would show up at a different location every month with the senior leadership team, and we would do a bunch of focus groups and town halls and meet with every layer inside of that office. And we would start to hear the 10 We's being played out in the conversations. And I would see signage. I saw it start to pop up, things that I never commissioned. In most cases, my direct reports weren't aware of it either. But I was convinced it was pandering to the new guy. I was convinced that these were plants. They were kind of dropping these principles in our dialogue when we were on site because we want to make the boss feel like we're following his lead. Until one day, a very, very senior woman on my team who reported directly to me, I kind of shared with her. I'm like, Lori, is this really working? Because I just feel like it's a little bit of brown nosing going on here. And she, in the most forceful yet almost maternal way, turned to me and said, would you stop? Just stop. It's working. Everything here that you're seeing on these walls, we didn't ask for this. They asked for it. They put it up. So there's this thing that happens where you may not know that you may not see the momentum until the momentum is so big it's unavoidable. And that's where that was my experience. But now that I've learned the impact the principles are having at this point, dozens of organizations. I've sold nearly 50,000 copies of my book at this point. I'm convinced there's a place in the world for these things. So it's easier for me to kind of evangelize the principles, which I think makes it easier for others to adopt, which makes it easier for others to kind of stay connected to them. What tends to happen, it really depends on how mature the team or the organization is you'll see pockets of real impact where the principles are just palpable. You can see them, you can hear them. They're wearing the shirts, they're wearing the bracelets, and you can hear it in the dialogue. It's like, hey, Tim, I know you're struggling a bit, and we pick each other up. You don't have to tell me what's going on, but just want you to know I care, and walk away. You start to hear instances of that. There was a leader in one of the sites who had a corkboard on her in her office that other members of the team, regardless of their title, could come in, put a Post-it with someone's name on it that they saw living one of the We's. So there's this real momentum that happens, but I don't want to mislead people. It's not a light switch. You're never there because it's human nature to backslide into the way of old, how we've always done things, how, challenges become less prevalent. So it does take a conspicuous reminder over and over again. That's why the leader's obligation to living it remains very, very important.
No, absolutely. And I love the fact that you talked about the dialogue because not very many people pick that up. And I once had a boss early on tell me, he's like, hey, look, listen to how the boss talks. And listen to the key words he's always saying. And then make sure when you get a chance to back brief him, you always put those words in there so you know that you're listening to what he's saying.
Yeah.
And so not a lot of people pick that up. And so the fact that you picked up on it, you're like, you problems with me. Like, that's kind of funny. And I'm glad that it wasn't, though, for sure.
Hey, back in those days, it's not quite as easy to do now, but back in those days, we didn't do video calls. Everything was teleconference, everything was all voice. And I was one of those guys, I admit it, and ultimately my team knew about it, but I would dial in the calls and not announce myself because I was part of it was skepticism, back to that pandering thing, my being kind of coddled to because these are my principles, or is it really working? I would just dial in and listen. And I started to hear the principles in a non-pandering, like they didn't know I was there, so they weren't trying to please me. And that's, I think, a real litmus test for leaders is what's happening when you're out of the room. Are people behaving the same way, or is it a free for all? Ultimately, in many cases, a lot more work gets done when you're not in the room. But I was dialing in to listen, partially to learn, B, to see if I was kind of being pandered to, or if this was a legitimate movement. But also, it was an opportunity for me to learn because I was new into that role. But when you start to hear your own words played back to you, for me, it becomes less about me and the principles and more about what we are building collectively and how we've kind of created this magnet, if you will, that we know we're all being pulled in that same direction.
Yeah, it's
Cool.
great. It's really cool and great when you actually can see the culture come into place and become culture and not just like a sticky board or like a poster that says,
Tchotchkes, yeah.
yeah. So I think that's really great.
Yeah, right on.
So my last question for you then is there anything that we didn't talk about or something I didn't ask you that you were like, you know what? I really wish that you asked me this question.
No question comes to mind, but I'll take it as an opportunity to give maybe a parting thought on kind of the whole waterfront that we've covered here. And I would just add a word that I don't think I've mentioned much, and it's authenticity. And maybe I touched on it earlier, but I've grown really attached to this notion that our level of authenticity has a direct kind of impact or plays into the level of trust that we're able to establish. And I go a step further to say authenticity plus relatability equals trust. We can't follow someone if we're always questioning if what they're saying is what they mean. We can't follow someone if their words are not consistent with their actions. We're left guessing, and that's not a good place to be. So if I'm guessing what it is if I'm guessing your intentions and I'm guessing what you meant by what you said, I'm wasting valuable brain power on trying to interpret versus actually getting shit done. So that in itself is a problem, but also we will never find trust never mind the workplace. When you're dealing with someone who is not their true authentic selves, warts and all, like I'm not saying it's a facade of perfection. Like it's the good, bad, and the ugly. There's this sense of relatability that happens, and then trust is so much more easily formed. And I guess that's a long-winded way of saying if there was a question that you didn't ask, it would probably be what is one really important characteristic or attribute to becoming a really impactful leader? And authenticity for me.
Absolutely. And for everybody listening to this, go into the descriptions of this episode. You're going to be able to find the link to Kyle's book. You'll be able to find the link to all of his socials and his websites. That way you can get a hold of him and his team and to really dig into the Begin With We book and also everything that he has to offer. So Kyle, I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Tim, you're doing really important work, man. Thank you for having me.
Well,
Respect.
thank